to have, today we're very pleased to have Rosa Galeva, who teaches in our program. So Rosa's got extensive experience with over 18 years working in commodity derivatives. And I noticed several of the participants have a background in commodity derivatives as well, which reminds me that she has kindly agreed to take questions or comments during her talk. So you can just unmute and ask away. So she's been employed at senior levels as a quant at Williams Energy, Northeast Utilities, and most recently for 13 years at Morgan Stanley. So she worked at Morgan Stanley in different roles and departments, including the valuation group and later the Morgan Stanley Strats and Modeling Group. Prior to industry, Rosa was teaching courses in math in different countries. She has a PhD from Moscow State University in mathematical physics. She published papers in geometry, PDE, dynamical systems, and financial engineering. With teaching very successfully, I might add, courses in financial engineering and working with NYU students on research projects in commodity derivatives. Okay, Rosa, please, why don't you share your screen and take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm very pleased finally to make this seminar. It didn't work out before, but it doesn't matter. So the time came, and I'm very pleased to make this presentation, and particularly because it is my work with NYU students, and some of them are graduated, some of them still in school and will be graduating. It's been my great pleasure to collaborate and share with them my passion for commodities and commodity derivatives. So the subject of this presentation is studies of commodity volatilities and correlation, and I call it In Pursuit of Samuelson because Samuelson effect, both for commodities, for volatilities and less known for correlations, which we did one of my students, has been my kind of pain and thought and source of considerations. And it was quite important while I was at Morgan Stanley. We really had a lot of, spent a lot of time on calibration, but still I felt like there is something, one should look at it in great depths. And finally, when I left Morgan Stanley, started to teach, so I had all this time, so we look at this really in great details, and that's what I present to you. So, and in general, just give you a general idea, and I'm very pleased that there are some participants with commodity background. The study of empirical, so study of price returns, empirical distributions is quite important because simply because the liquidity, the traded, for example, quoted volatilities are only for short tenors. So therefore, you need to understand how to extrapolate. Moreover, it is crucial, of course, for hedging. And on top of that, there are a lot of products which actually will be sensitive to term structure of volatilities, and I will give more detail. That particular example, which we studied in great detail in our first paper on the subject, was swaption, right? And in general, of course, you're probably aware that commodities, they present unique challenges. That's what I always tell my students. It's the area where you can never be bored, right? Because there are always challenges to solve, right? And there are always new products. And these products, they don't come from just because, you know, you have nothing else to do and, you know, create something complicated and fancy, but because it's just life, right? So it's life which suggests to you that you look at the valuation of particular derivative, which in many cases, it's evaluation of assets. So, so essentially, I'm kind of doing the same what I did in industry. The only difference, of course, in industry I was paid, here I'm not. So this is just more for fun and for eventually, and hopefully for publications. So I'd like to give some overview of what I will be talking about. And I will pursue three goals. First of all, I will look, as I said, the Samuelson effect for commodity correlations, and this problem which I started to think about while in Morgan Stanley, how to parameterize properly calendar correlation. Sounds simple, but there are certain properties which you have to respect. And it's been a long way, but eventually it hit me that the way how it should be done. And
not everybody, I'm expecting not everybody knows what a calendar correlation is.
Yeah, calendar correlations is just correlation, the same commodity, for example, WTI futures. And this is correlations, those are correlations between different futures. That's all it is. For example, if we look at the swap, which is swap for 2022, we have collection of 12 futures, right? So we're looking at correlation 12 by 12. Or if we have 5 years, right, or looking forward, then we'll have 60 by 60. So that's what we're looking at. And this is actually, this swap is underlying of a swaption, which is option on a swap. You have this option to enter a swap, which is very, very popular in commodity markets for various reasons. And that's what we studied.
Okay. So you told us that the Samuelson effect for volatilities is that the term structure slopes down. What about for correlations?
Yeah, this right. And for correlations, I will come. This won't be my second part of the presentation. Yeah, correlations are so essentially correlation, Samuelson effect for correlations, what I called, and in fact I found someone else which came to that, like I did not say that before. It is essentially that correlations, if you look at correlations between two futures, for WTI in particular, it will depend how far away those are, right? In like, the distance, so to say, like, for example, January,
let's say I average.
months.
Yeah, so if I average the two materials, is the correlation declining in that average? Is that?
No, so essentially this is, so there are two things going on. In particular for Samuelson, which should be called that, for example, January, February 22 versus January, February 23. January, February 23 will be more correlated than January and February 22 because they're far away, further away in the future.
Oh, so it's up the opposite direction.
This opposite direction, and of course, yes, and there is a reason for that, and I'll show details how we model that. On top of that, correlations, you have to specify which time period you calculate it upon, right? So, so if you calculate it in, for example, 1 year versus 2 years, correlations on 2 years will be stronger. So I will give all details when we come to that.
Thank you.
And then actually, so the oil is a beautiful commodity, and we decoded this is totally. However, together with oil, we have also commodities as natural gas or power, which have this, complication that are seasonal. So our next goal was generalize Samuelson effect with respect of seasonality, and we'll actually figure it out. It was not obvious, but we did. Also, what is very important, and this kind of will go through the whole presentation because of this recent events, right? When we could not believe our eyes in April 20, when the prompt future of WTI went negative, and there was total shock and just disbelief, right? So therefore, for that reason, of course, then you would think, okay, so if prices are not anymore log normal, you would naturally, the first you thought, you will go to Bachelier, our favorite Bachelier model, Peter, right? Which I know it is your favorite as well. So for that reason, I will do kind of parallel always between Black and Bachelier because I feel it's quite relevant. And now, it is important to include and also to look. What we actually found that, not surprisingly, for bachelor walls, meaning like we look at just arithmetic returns, right? We also see Samuelson effect, right? And it might be different, and how it's different from black. In fact, that's what we studied with just recently and found some nice regularities. And as I said, everything which I report here was done in collaboration with IMIU students. They took some courses, 1 or 2, work on with me on capstone projects, but I will give them all their names. My first collaborator, who is the graduate and so he works now. We work on model of gross indicative commodity correlation with Thomas, and he took my commodity course in spring 18. After that, I had wonderful students in my stochastic calculus class, and one of them actually reached to me himself during winter break, and he said he wanted to do a project. So I thought maybe we'll look at implied correlations on commodity calendar spread options. So Litai and then Zichi joined later on, and she actually stayed with me through all this time and still working with me. So she's been a great support, and it's just wonderful. And I will cry when she's gone, because I would never have another Zichi, for sure. And she's here, so I'm pleased that she joined. So when these things happened, right, in the spring 20, last spring, I told myself, this is just unusual data, and we have no time to lose, and we should do big studies of this data. And so I did this big capstone project with variety of students. Chi Yang, he is also I saw he joined. Yu Shao, he's in China, and Xiao, which also was one of my students. They worked with me, and also Zichi was a big part of it, and she did a lot of stuff. I cannot even just describe everything what we have done with her. And also with Zichi, we continue to look at calibration of Samuelson for natural gas and finally figure it out. Right now, actually, because also there is, so it's like oil is very nice, right? And you can kind of trace it, and it's clean and beautiful. Natural gas, it's more tricky, and sometimes it doesn't want to follow exactly your theories. And then next commodity complications, right, in order of complication is power, right? But I felt like it's important to look at the power as well. So right now we're looking at another student of mine, doing capstone project this spring, looking at Samuelson for power. And we also started an interesting problem. Look at look at the derivative, which is kind of very interesting. I look at that while in Morgan Stanley revenue put. So essentially, it's like there is a power plant, and you have a certain revenue, which is like spread options between power and gas. But then you have put option. If revenue is not enough, then you will have some insurance protection of revenue. So, and correlation, of course, is a big part of it. So we're looking at this with Zichi again, and Julia, who is also a graduate, and she also took several courses with me. And so we'll continue this work, and I think there are a lot of things to do. Actually, it's each day, I think that there's something else we should look at. So I hope we will continue this. All right, so now we come to the Samuelson effect, and because I don't know if everyone in the audience know exactly what it is, let me formulate it more precisely. So essentially, we're looking at forward price volatility, both historical and implied, as they get closer to maturity. For example, if you start looking at January 23, for example, and volatility is not so big, and then when you get closing in time, you will see that prices will start fluctuating much more. And the first time it was postulated in Samuelson, it was in Samuelson, of course, himself, 65 studies, which is entitled Proof that Properly Anticipated Prices Fluctuate Randomly. What is surprising for me, in fact, when I looked closely at the literature, when we were in Morgan Stanley, we never questioned that Samuelson is present for commodity futures, right? While actually in academic studies, they question that and they actually make it really high hypothesis and look at various statistical ways to prove that actually it is present. There is big studies on this subject. In particular, for example, they were looked in agricultural commodities, of course, oil products in their derivatives, Brent, gasoline. But if you go and look at other, there's also commodities, but more closer to FX than like say real commodities per se, silver, gold, copper, fixed income, right? You would not see this present. You would not see this increase of volatility as you go closer. And in general, there is this big study that it is supported in market where sort of like real assets, right? Not financial, but something more real, like WTI, where there is this component. You know, there is this reality, for example, WTI or natural gas, if there are changes in the weather or hurricanes, right, then people start worrying and there is this more activity. Or for example, in the spring, there was total lack of storage. And there was, of course, this pandemic, which there was not so much consumption, but production was still going on. So for that reason, it came to that point that you know, the price went just negative. And in fact, we did include, lately I decided, before we kind of tried to get away from these couple of days where we had negative crisis, but then I said, why not? Let's include them. And of course, you cannot take log return on negative price, but there is like a way to avoid this, because what you can do, you can take just percentage return, right? And then you don't worry about negative price, right? So that's what we did lately and decided to include even negative prices events. And there is this nice quote from classical textbook that when you look, for example, at corn, right, agricultural, then when you further away from that future, you don't worry, and there's a little information, there is not much volatility. But when you come closer, there is much more information, which actually kind of causes this these bigger moves of the future. This one snapshot of WTI implied vols, which is not ideally going down right away, right? But eventually it's going down. The problem with implied vols, there's only visibility, it's up to 12 months. And that's kind of not enough to catch it properly. So now actually I'm talking specifics, how we parameterize the Samuelson effect. And so I found one of the, you know, that's there is several books on commodities. One of them by Glenn Swindle, which is a nice book as well as Alex books, of course. Peter Wright, Alexander Eidelman, our great friend. And here he suggests to model decay volatility choosing form for total implied variance, right? And what he does, he models this with two exponential decays, right? Essentially, he's saying implied variance, right? Total realized variance, implied variance would be governed by some normalization factor, and then there are two terms, right? One decay, right? And then another decay, essentially, another decay is like behavior of long-term you know, long-term decay when you go to kind of infinity, right? And normalization factor is absolutely needed because you want to match the total variance to the implied market volatility, right? So for that reason, it is there. But because of previous studies of correlations, I find it more convenient to model instantaneous vol, right? So not the total volatility, but instantaneous vol, and then you can integrate it if necessary, do whatever you need to, right? And
I have a quick question about
Yes.
Oh, Rosa, so I have a quick question about Swindle's approach. So let's say a simpler approach would be to have one exponential, and a more complicated approach would be to have three. So why do you suppose, he settled on two being the right number of declining exponentials that we're mixing in order to get a decaying term structure?
Yeah, what he says, and actually we try to look at that. We also try to see if there is this more refined decay at infinity as well. So the sigma 0 and capital B have to be there, right? That's a must, right? Then what you can do,
Okay.
you can say there is this constant level at infinity. But what Glenn was stating in his book, that actually he thinks that this level is still decaying, but maybe slow, right? So this little b is dominant, and this capital B is dominant, and little beta is more kind of refined. This is some decay. That's what he states. We studied with my students. We tried this model as well. In fact, what we ended up with that, we decided beta is 0. We did not see much improvement from, and it's more complicated, right? Like, if you complicate model, do it one complication at a time, right? So we decided we will, so far actually we find just putting beta equals 0 is fine, but he claims that he saw this that this 3-parameter models is better. That's what he states in the book.
No, I think you mean lambda 0. Like you said, beta 0. Are you trying to say empirically it's better to have like one exponential?
No, I'm saying he says he empirically he actually saw 4 parameters, right? Actually, sigma 0. Well, okay. This is normalization. Just like actually, essentially the decay is capital B, this constant, and beta, right? So what we look at the data, and we look at a lot of data, and what we're saying, in fact, this beta can be 0. We don't have to have this, and this is very hard to catch it. Infinity is very hard to catch, right? So essentially what we ended up, we just left with lambda, that's all.
Oh, okay. Okay, so a single, so let's say a shifted exponential.
Yes,
yeah, okay, that's fine.
So it's like level at infinity, right.
Yeah. So it doesn't, so implied variance does not go to 0 is what the point is. So implied variance does not go to 0.
Yes, okay, yes, exactly. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
go ahead.
Rosa, this is Leon. Can I ask a question? Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Hi, Rosa, it's Leon. Hello. How are you?
Yes.
Rosa, question. I should know this because I actually was Glenn's TA in the course at Courant. So I'm embarrassed, but just understand. So what you're saying is, if you look at the first statement, right? So you're in other words, we observe for if we have an option of, let's say, 3-month expiry on, let's say, a contract 6 months out, we can observe the implied volatility today for the 3-month tenor of that contract, right? Right. Now, just trying to understand, right? So when you look at that on the left-hand side, so the total implied volatility based on option prices for the contract of delivery date capital T at calendar time little t, right? Okay. Now, what is the capital T minus little t term there? I'm a little confused here. When you write
capital T is the expiration of the future, right?
Right. Yeah. But I mean, what
future, not option.
No,
future.
Hey, Leon, I think I know what's going on. She's not multiplying. She's not multiplying.
I know she was at that value, right?
Right, at that value, correct.
So let's say today, let's say they were, let's say, an option, let's say 3 months long on the Jan 22 contract. So we could extract the implied volatility. So the volatility over the next 3 months of that contract sitting out a year from today, 10 months from today, a certain number, right? So that would be the sigma squared at calendar time today, little t.
No, actually, this is what he's saying. This is total implied variance up to the expiration. So no, actually, that's not what he does, and that's why actually we went to the instantaneous. Well, because you can always
right, exactly, yes.
So in other words, there's actually a times between the, on the left-hand side, this times between sigma squared and time to maturity. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
Yeah, right, yeah.
That it's
Right.
times not evaluated at, like, unfortunately, the math
No,
notation.
I mean,
No,
it-
no, that is time,
It's actually
that is
time.
time.
So let's
That,
say
time,
in
yeah,
a-
yes, right,
yeah.
yes, right.
well, so the time is
So
today, right?
multiplied
Right
by.
now we're sitting a little c. Capital C is expiration of the
Of the contract.
future, of the
Of the
future,
contract, yes, right.
of the future. And then you can integrate whatever you can integrate from today until whatever date you decide, right? Correct? Yes?
Yeah,
Yeah,
But
sure,
capital
can we-
T is the future, and it's this is the
Yeah.
notation is fine. Trust me, this is classical notation, and that's how we deal with futures. Little c, capital
Yeah.
T, right?
all right, so on the left-hand side, it's sigma squared multiplied by time to maturity. And in,
Yes.
in, let's say, the black model, as opposed to Samuelson's model, you know, where volatility is quote constant, the
Yeah,
left-hand side would be increasing linearly with, you know, slope sigma squared, which is positive with
Right.
time to maturity.
Mhm.
And, you know, what I'm reading is because of this dominant, very strong Samuelson effect, that instead of increasing, I'm thinking B and beta are both positive, and
Yes.
there's decreasing going on because it's so strong, because the decline, you know, the Samuelson effect is so strong that it overwhelms the, you know, the linear growth that would occur in total implied variance.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, right.
Okay,
well,
so that's my interpretation. If I got it right, that there really is a multiplication between sigma squared and time to maturity on the left.
yeah, that's
as
what he
opposed-
claims, and that's what
Okay.
what actually I
Yeah.
find not very convenient. I would still, so
Okay.
I gave this because I just wanted to pay respects to his, you know, the book. But in general, you can just completely forget it and look at this, and this is instantaneous vol. Okay, this is
Okay,
vol
yeah.
at time, little time t, when we're looking at the future with expiration capital T. That's it. So, and let's forget this, so because it's, I agree, it's kind of confusing. But
I mean, the thing is just simply because you can't observe, I can't observe 3-month implied on the Jan
No,
20. It's not available, right? Basically, right?
no,
Yeah.
right, but he's looking at implied variance. So, or maybe, Leon, we can discuss this a little bit later.
Of course, sure, absolutely.
I'm kind of worried about timing.
Sure.
Right. So, so now what we decided, so we look at different ways to calibrate this particular instantaneous vol. Right now, instantaneous vol, I insist. And what we can do, we can look at implied vols, which is great. Of course, this is forward looking. However, as I said, the shape is not ideal. So firstly and secondly, it's only 12 months. Then what we can do, we can fix time interval, right? And look at the realized volatilities of returns of future contracts, right? With these expirations. And then finally, what we ended up, and that is kind of snapshot, and this is, in my opinion, the best way to look at Samuelson. We look at volatility of returns of nearby contracts, right? So meaning like we always look at contract, you know, which is first in capital T, and then whenever it's expired, we start looking at next one, et cetera, right? So, and what we try to do, we try to catch a really instantaneous vol. Actually, we ended up looking 2 months of observations, and during these 2 months of observation, of course, this is not the same future, right? Because if we started looking at the future 2 months, right, this prompt contract the first prompt contract will expire, so you start looking at next one, and that would work really nicely. So now, because of the Samuelson, what we expect to see that we will see smaller volatilities for, like, say, contract number 12 versus contract number 1, right? And because we have different regimes of different vols, we remove this effect of volatility level by just simply normalizing it this kind of standard way, right? Volatilities by volatility of first contract, right? So we look at kind of normalized vol. And we do the same for Bachelier, of course, right? As usual, we do the same for Bachelier because I said this is something which we keep looking at. Now, so what? So I've been thinking about the Samuelson quite a bit, and to me, finally, essentially, the strength of Samuelson is kind of two things. First of all, this is rate of exponential decay, how fast you go, you decay, right? So exponential decay. And next thing is so how fast you decay and where you decay to, right? So when time becomes infinity, where is your where is your level, right, of long-term volatility? And essentially, we can even don't use any particular parameterization and make it sort of parameterization free. We can look in this sense at volatility, normalized volatility of the 12 contract and then 60. Why 60? Because this is kind of our visibility, more or less, what we see, in terms of quotes and calculating. So another way is just always, and that's what we did in studying Bachelier in Black. We look at normalized vol at 12 and 60 months, and it will show certain picture. So this is one particular example of our fit. As you see, it's not perfect, but it's actually pretty great, right? So we look at volatilities of this is first nearby, and then we look at 5 years. And actually, we're doing quite well, right? If you see, of course, it's data, it's real data, but we're doing very well. Next thing, so essentially the fit is as usual. You look at normalized vols and you find the best parameters which fit this structure. Of course, there are different forces of certain parameters, so we found kind of more stable way. Specifically looking at 12 and 60 months and doing this is like looking, we're not looking everywhere, right, for these parameters, but we first identify the region where you should look at, right? So it's a more narrow region, and then we find the best which fits the structure of observed realized volatilities. And here I show you the normalized black holes observed on different days. And as you see, as you imagine, of course, this particular sharp, like kind of going to abyss and very low level of long-term volatility was observed on the period which included that that dramatic, negative prices. So this is observation T2, right? So here it's just absolutely outrageous. And the red one is just before that. So it was some anticipation sort of, right? So there was going steep. And then essentially right now we also look at more recent data. It's kind of getting more sort of normal, right? So very quickly, because we're talking about Black versus Bachelier, essentially, of course, in Bachelier, we look at volatility of arithmetic returns. So it's a so-called dollar vol, right? So the volatility, dollar per square root of time, right? In Black-Scholes, we look at volatility of log returns. The moneyness is, in Bachelier world, is the difference, right? Strike minus price. And here it's just log F over K. And actually that's the main reason why we also, I'm not going to talk about this, but I did also studies on volatility smiles, and Bachelier smile became practically flat when there was this, that snapshot of implied vols show practically a flat Bachelier smile, but I'm not going to talk about this. And again, the reason is different moneyness. That's the whole reason. And of course, delta, which is very important, right? So now I show you contrasting Black and Bachelier. And if you think it just without, just in simple terms, what happens is, because we're looking at dollar volatility for Bachelier, right, versus volatility of log returns. So the structure of the forward curve becomes important, right? Because if you look at, a contango environment and you have high prices on the end, then they should dampen this decay of volatility, right? So Bachelier becomes weaker. And vice versa, if we have the backwardation, right, you will have decay of prices further, then you will amplify Samuelson, and Bachelier will be stronger. And this is exactly what we see. For example, if we look at March 20th, right? So Bachelier is red and it is above, right? It's decaying slower. Why? Well, because there are the higher prices at the end and they make this decays weaker. And vice versa, if we look at the period 2007, when there was backwardation, we see Samuelson is Batchelor is stronger because we have, on top of that, we have lower prices at the end. Right. So, so essentially, in general, what is can be seen when we have strong contango and crash, Batchelor model is much more preferable than black model. That's kind of a conclusion what we see. All right, now I will come to seasonal commodities, right? So we did our studies on oil, and that worked nicely, and Brent as well. And I'll show you the results, and you can see actually the fit is pretty nice from one example. But now when we come to natural gas, it is more complicated because we have seasonality, right? And there are different seasons. For example, of course, there is this winter when the weather is very cold and the prices involved are high for natural gas, and there is spring or fall, which everything is kind of quiet, right? Of course, if you look at implied natural gas volatility, you will see that it's not like, you know, it's not like WTI is going down, but there is certain seasonal patterns, right? So therefore, we have to kind of generalize our methodology, looking, you know, using nearby contracts to natural gas. The problem is that we cannot combine different contracts because, for example, we cannot put together March or April because they are like in different seasons, right? Because clearly there is this distinction between different seasons. So we try many different things, and essentially we figure out how to do it because we said, okay, so it's not one Samuelson, right? Not just Samuelson of decay for everyone, but we have two seasons. We decided to go just two, winter and summer. Like winter is November through March, and the summer is the complement. And then we're looking for not just one set of Samuelson parameters, but two, right? So, so therefore, when we look at the normalized volatilities and started to fit Samuelson, we have to always remember which seasons we're looking at. Also, 1 month is very noisy. We needed 2 months, so we put 2 months of data as before, but now we've been very careful not to put different months in the picture. And it worked out. I mean, of course, I show you the best picture, like one of the best pictures. It's not always that pretty, but if you can see, right? So this is empirical and versus fitted. We did pretty nicely here, right? So we actually, because of the different strengths of Samuelson, we don't have just straight decay, right? Because they're different. They're winter and summer. In fact, we're doing because this is the switch sort of right here. So we have different decay versus decay, which is in the previous season. And that's so now, but we have more parameters, which is, that's what we have to do. So we have winter and summer Samuelson. And because again, if we look at Batchelor, contrast with Batchelor, we will see less seasonality. Well, the explanation, I think, is because when prices are low, volatility is high, right? So therefore, the Batchelor should kind of dampen the seasonal structure of volatilities, and that's what we, when we construct two periods, that's what we see. Any questions? Okay, and now, because again, we talked about Batchelor and Black and Batchelor, what we did now, we said, okay, because we have this relationship between, the structure of the forward curve and then strengths of Black and Samuelson, what we look at relationship between Black and Batchelor-Samuelson, looking at the forward yield, right? So how steep this the forward curve goes up or down, right? Is it negative or positive? And actually what we found is very nice, this empirical relationship. Then if we take normalized WTI 12 months, normalized Black versus normalized Batchelor, right? So we contrast the strengths by looking at 12 months and then plot it versus forward yield, right? Then we see a pretty nice picture of, straight line that as we showed before, right? So this ratio might be less or more than 1, right? Because that's what we remember. B is kind of 12 months normalized vol, right? Depending, is it like 0.9 or 0.7 or 0.99, right? It all depends. So we saw this pretty neat picture of comparing strength of Samuelson versus forward yield. Which makes, looks very natural to me.
Rosa, by forward yield, do you mean convenience yield? Is that what you mean?
No, forward yield, it's straightforward. You look how steep your forward goes up or down. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just take a look of 2 futures sort of, and then.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that's what it is. It's literally the slope of the forward curve, sort of.
Between 2 points, basically, right? Between two.
Yeah, well, we did some average just to, and then also make sure that we can predict sort of. So we started at the beginning of the period. We look at the forward curve, right, and then calculated this forward yield, which is on the x-axis, right, and then look at this whole period, calibrated everything, right, Batchelor, Black and Samuelson. Actually, we didn't even calibrate. We only look at 12 months. Black and 12 months Batchelor, and that's what we see, right? So when it's negative, you have more than 1, and if it's positive, strong positive, as it was in spring 20, we have a ratio is less than 1, right? So Batchelor is weaker. So we did not make any theoretical studies, but it's like kind of very nice. And actually, it's not only for WTI. We found the same phenomena for Brent and natural gas, and hopefully for power we're studying right now. So, and this is summary of result of Samuelson. So we used actually, whatever data we had, right? So about 15 years. And look at WTI, Brent, and natural gas. And if you look at this table, right, so this is average error, right? It's in fact is pretty like, for example, for WTI and Brent, the fit is extremely good, right? And this is worse error. And then I also put for like just giving you the sense of the magnitude of the KB, only B. So the weakest is Brent, and then goes WTI, and then natural gas is stronger, which kind of makes sense, right? This is winter and summer. In summer is slightly, not always, but slightly weaker. Okay, now I have like 15 minutes, Peter, so I'll go, unfortunately, not so much time, but because it's a lot of work we've done. So now I'm talking about correlations. Correlations are extremely important for modeling energy commodities, and that's why this is my subject forever and ever, and I will keep doing this probably for a long time to come. So what we did with Thomas, we look at the first possible correlations, which is calendar correlations, right? And because we look at the swaption, we needed a model to parameterize calendar correlations between different futures, right? So, for example, for a swap of 60 months or 12 months or whatever. There are no market codes on correlations. Sometimes, occasionally, you can get the swaption code. So the study was based mostly on historical observation, but as I said, we did actually a study also of implied correlations, but they're not enough to calibrate the full model. So let me just formulate now precisely what properties of realized correlations we have. So we look at this sample of future prices, right? So we calculate as usual log returns, and then we take correlations, right? And suppose we calculate these correlations on interval T1, T2, right? So this fixed interval, it shouldn't be too short because correlations would be quite noisy. Normally we do it with in our calibration 1 year, because that's kind of the best length. So what we see that correlation increase with time to the first contract, right? So if we have two contracts, TI, TJ, and the first is earlier, so the increase with the time, like I said, January 23 versus January 22. And also they increase with length of observation, right? And that's what I call Samuelson effect for correlations. Okay, so this increase in two directions. And then if you fix that time interval, right, and then what happens, so and you fix time to the first contract, then correlation will decay with the distance. So meaning like January, February would be stronger than January, say March, right, or January, June. Right. So again, here we used the assumption of instantaneous or local correlation between two contracts, and that can be defined as instantaneous wall as a limit of realized correlation on the interval when T1 goes to T2, right? Essentially, we're looking right like instantaneous wall. Instantaneous correlation right at the expiration, right? And the dynamic of instantaneous correlation is as follows. So if we have time to two contracts, right, and TI less than TGA, and then we look instantaneous correlation between two contracts and time little t, okay, then the behavior is as follows. It starts with correlation right at the expiration of the earlier contract, and then it goes to 1 when TI becomes very long, right? So at infinity, if you see at infinity, so now we have this another parameter alpha. So at infinity, when this is so it becomes 0 and we go to 1, and that's what we want, right? So correlations between, say, in the very distant future, right, go to 1. So that's kind of one of the properties, and we start always at this unknown correlation right at the expiration of the earlier contract. Okay. So the assumption is for non-seasonal commodity, this correlation depends only on the time between two contracts. And in case of seasonal commodities, actually might be a function also of which months in particular do we look between winter, or summer, winter. So it might be also seasonal. So this is our assumption of instantaneous correlation, as the same like for volatility we assume. And now we start doing all necessary calculation. For example, also actually we assume the simple Samuelson, because Samuelson is not as important here. So this is okay, this is totally fine. This assumption, just exponential decay, no long term. And then we start to calculate like realized correlation on interval T1, T2, right? Based on this assumption of instantaneous wall, right? That's all it is. And we can show that doing this integration under this assumption of Samuelson, that this becomes really simple expression that in fact this realized correlation, right, between TI and TJ, it's nothing but instantaneous correlation kind of bumped by this transformation. So it's linear convex combination between unit correlation matrix, right, and correlation matrix of C0, right? That's because that's what it is. So right, this is KS, it's some number less than 1. Right, and that's what we're looking at. We're looking at convex combination of two correlation matrices. And KS would be a function of the growth, and then Samuelson, some form as follows. So now actually the problem is, so then we have to like kind of figure out what the instantaneous correlations are, right? But that is pretty hard. So instead of that, we actually did something more elegant. What we did, because of the assumption that correlation depends only on the distance between two contracts, right, I minus j, then what we can say that we will refer to the first column, right, and take that like model that as decay, and then so essentially we avoid this problem on figuring out what exactly this C0 C0ij is, but instead we look at the modeling on the first column, right? So in this, so because essentially we're saying ij is the same, there's correlation between the first contract and then I minus j minus I plus 1, right? So we just shifted because we think there is this dependence only on the distance. And then what we have to do, we have to model this correlation of the first row or first column. That's all it is, right? And we look at two models to model this first column. One is very simple. This is quite popular in industry. You say in the correlations, just this, you know, like some parameter b, and then they decay this form, exponential form, right? So you start with this assumption, and then you can get the whole correlation matrix based on two parameters, Ks and beta. That's all you need, right? Because this, so correlation will start growing because time to the first contracts increases. And another one, which actually kind of hit me at some point because the simple didn't work out. There is this very elegant geometrical interpretation of correlation matrix as a bunch of vectors in n-dimensional, on-dimensional sphere, right, which make these angles, right? So essentially, any correlation matrix can be modeled through some angle representation, right? So therefore, I said, well, this was too strong. So instead of modeling this way, what we can do, we can put this exponential decay inside the cosine or sine function, right? So this, based on this angular representation, we model this correlation as in this form, right? So which is actually, so it still goes to 0 as times goes to infinity, right? But it goes slower than this, right? And as soon as we model that, we can always increase, make a growth of correlation with this, the same Ks. Sorry, I'm going kind of fast, but I don't have much time. And this is what we show, we see in reality, right? So if we look at realized historical correlation, which is that this purple, right? Then if we look at the fitted simple model, it's not good, right? Because it's too strong. I mean, it just does not do the job. But if we take this angular presentation like this, right? Then it goes very much nicer, right? So, and that's what we see, that we can model these oil correlations using these angular representations. Any questions? I went very fast.
So Rosa, this capital C simply is the instantaneous correlation right at the time of the expiration or delivery of the first contract, right?
C0, yes, but
yes.
I don't use it. Yes, Leon, it is, but I don't use it. What I do actually, it's much simpler. So, so what I do, I use so if you look at the correlation matrix, right? For example, you have 12 by 12, right? So for example, say it starts January 22nd, right? So you look at correlation January 22nd through December 22nd, right? And there are a bunch of other, in this correlation 12 by 12. So you look at the first column, right? So it's a correlation of January 22 to everyone else, right? February, etc. So December, right? So what I choose to is to model this first column as decay, okay? As decay, right? So in this way. So like it's this way, right? So this form, right? So I'm saying I put T1 and then Tj from 1 to 12. and I'm saying this is how they decay, right? That's it. And then I take this correlation, and then when I go to February, for example, February and everyone else, I know they should be slightly higher, right? Because the time to February, it's more than time to January, right?
Right.
So I use this KS, right? So I bump them properly, right? And etc. So if I go to March, they will be even higher, etc., right? And that's what I need, and that's it, right? So for the oil, this is enough. Okay. And I don't use this instantaneous correlation because who knows what they are? I don't have no idea. And then of course we look at to find the best parameters, looking at historical realized correlation, looking at the best combination, but we have to be careful because we have to move in the space of positive definite matrices, which we did with Thomas. He put excellent numerical procedures to do so. So we did this calibration on a lot of historical data, right? And we looked how many actually we looked. So for example, and what on top of that, actually, in most cases, what happens, you know, any estimation of correlation has statistical bounds, right? Because if you have so many points and you have this level of correlation, you can say where exactly it is between what and what. And what we can say that our fit, right, it's within a bound of this error, which, you know, it's great, right? So we actually have excellent fit. It's really, we up to this error, we fit very, very nicely. So, and we did as much data also with Thomas. We look at calibration of this model, and it worked. You know, it really worked well. We really will. And on top of that, what I can say that this model, which actually was designed for oil correlation, happened to work quite well for Everdell futures as well. We look at correlation of Everdell futures, but surprisingly, in there, this simple model works slightly better than the angular model, but it also fits. It's not only commodity. This correlation model can work for other. So, all right. So I guess that should do, because you know. Again, I went quick out through the second part. This actually was published in Journal of Derivatives in last spring. So this correlation model. So if you're interested, I'm happy to share that paper with you. So that's it. And you know, I am very proud of this work which I did with my wonderful favorite NYU students, and I really hope this work can continue for a long time.
I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead, David.
How are you?
One thing that we used to do at the other Morgan, at JP Morgan, was try to model these variables contingent on storage levels in oil,
Yes.
and contingent on pipeline usage in natural gas. I'm wondering if you sort of took out the effect of, you know, storage usage, that would also eliminate quite a bit of the seasonal component in measuring volatility, which might help to I think stabilize these estimates a bit more. Have you tried anything like that, or considered?
Yeah, well, yes, actually, I did not, like, for correlation, we did look at natural gas, David. Yeah, of course. And this is much more complicated. Natural gas, it's not like as beautiful as oil, right? Because all this seasonality. Yes, storage, I totally agree. Storage is quite important. We try to look at, sort of find data and have a look. You're right. It's, but we kind of did not succeed totally yet. You know, at least, you know, we could not totally make a beautiful model for natural gas. But you're talking about correlations or Samuelson, David?
I think both. I think the Samuelson effect is driven by mean reversion.
Yes.
Yeah. The seasonal effect is driven by, you know, the congestion of the natural gas pipelines, you know, during the hump months. And we haven't had that until last year, the real storage problem like we had with negative prices. So we haven't had a lot of data, and that wasn't really an important effect for oil. So I definitely see your point on the, why it was easy to do this for oil was because, the storage wasn't always full. It was a kind of a rare event, that
Right.
got that point.
Yeah, but yeah, no, this is very valid point. Of course, storage is a big part of the whole story. I totally agree. But now here, I would rather think like based on the storage level, what we can say about decay of Samuelson, decay of correlations, right? That's probably that's direction you mean, right? In terms of like in fact, what we did, we look at what the picture in numbers as they are based on the history, right? In whatever storage it was, it's kind of baked inside them, right? And try to find the best parameters of our model, right? And then from the other hand, of course, there is this nice possible consideration. You can look at the storage and just say like Samuelson will be stronger, weaker, or correlations would behave this way and that way. So, but it's not very easy. It's highly non-trivial, right? So there's a lot of data. You have to know how to use it, etc. So not quite obvious, but I'm happy to continue discussion with you. Absolutely.
You said you were going to do this for a long time, so I thought I'd just make a helpful suggestion.
Yes,
Yeah,
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, so about that negative oil futures price, I guess that's
Hello?
due to storage. And does
Yes.
that suggest that we could predict what commodity futures is going to have a negative price going forward? So, the next one besides oil is what I'm interested in. Like, what I'm thinking is if, storage plays varying roles across commodities in terms of its importance. And, if negative prices is due to lack of storage, then we could, predict which commodity has sort of is most likely to display a negative price in the future.
Yeah, but I think actually there was very unique, Peter. I think like this spring was unique because yeah, storage is a big part of it, but there was not enough demand, right? That's kind of was
okay,
I think
the other
it's
side
quite
of it.
unique, right? The other
Yeah.
side, like how much oil
fair
you
enough.
need, right? So
Yeah, so taking into account both storage and demand, then
yeah,
can
absolutely, right?
I think predict which commodity would have a negative price? That's the question. It's a hard question, but I'm just thinking.
I think a third effect though is that the market was somewhat ignorant. If everyone knew that demand was so low and storage was so unavailable, literally zero, then I think that outcome might have been avoided. The problem was we had all these people with long positions that were stuck at the same time, when the storage is not available and they had no way to get out, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
You can't take it to.
So my question remains, no matter how many refinements people propose. so whatever are the 12 different reasons for the negative crude oil futures price, I mean, do they together suggest a particular commodity that is going to experience a negative price going forward? Okay. It's a hard question, I know, but it's worth thinking
it's
about,
hard
right?
question. But so again, I think it was very unique this spring, right? Quite unique. I hopefully we're not having next pandemic, right? So hopefully this, like it's,
okay.
That's what I mean. I think that was big part of it, that there was nothing going on. I mean, that's what I think. Yes.
Pandemic related, which it could have been, I grant, but then let's say, they shouldn't be switching to the Bachelier model when we're out of the pandemic. Like maybe, let's say we're not out of it, I know, but it suggests though, when everybody's vaccinated, they should go back to a model where all oil futures prices are positive, right?
Right, so, but CME actually switched to Bachelier model for option pricing, and for now, I think they still in it. And there were negative strikes. They quoted options on negative strikes for a while. Right now, I'm not sure. Probably not, because it's far away now. It's kind of unrealistic. But it was there was some. I still think it's nice to look at two models because there are some again, like when I look at the volatility smiles and the Bachelier and black, there's certainly differences, especially pronounced on the contango and crash, right? Black Samuelson, Bachelier Samuelson also. Yeah, well, I mean, I think you should always keep us, two models in place. Like I would, keep
At least.
eye on that.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I would raise it to N. Okay, from 2. Okay, thank you very much, Rosa. That was really nice talk. And it's terrific that you're working with our students. So
I
we
agree.
really
I this has been great, and I actually, of course, we have again a repeat Chi and Zichi. If you can show yourself, we just have a look at you. Zichi, are you there? And I see JP even. This is great. Oh, here, this is Zichi and
Wow, yeah. Oh, there's
and Chi, where are you? Please show yourself. Here's Chi. Yeah, this is another my favorite student. And they will, so very great seeing you, and thank you for your diligent work. I know I've been very hard on you, but we did get some nice results. JP, it's nice seeing you.
All right, with that, we can stop.
JP, can you show yourself? No?
I'm currently in bed, so.
All right.
Hey, JP.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Next time, JP. Okay. Great seeing you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks,
Thank you
Rosa.
all. Thank you
Okay.
for coming.
All right,
Thank
let's
you.
stop the recording.
Thank you, Rosa. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.